Thomas Fletcher woke up that Tuesday morning just like any other day. The sun was shining through his small bedroom window. Birds were singing outside in the old oak tree. He could smell bacon cooking downstairs in the kitchen. His grandmother was making breakfast. Thomas was 8 years old. He had brown hair that always stuck up in the morning. His eyes were bright blue like his mother's had been. Thomas lived with his grandmother in a small house near Windsor Castle. They had lived together for 3 years now, ever since his parents died in a car accident. His grandmother called up the stairs. "Tommy, come down for breakfast. We have things to do today." Thomas jumped out of bed. He put on his favorite blue sweater and his old jeans. The jeans had a small hole in the knee, but his grandmother said they were still good. Thomas ran down the wooden stairs. The stairs made creaking sounds under his feet. In the kitchen, his grandmother was standing by the stove. She was a small woman with gray hair tied back in a bun. Her name was Margaret Fletcher, but everyone called her Grandma Maggie. She wore a flowered apron over her dress. Steam was rising from the pan where she cooked the bacon. "Good morning, Tommy," she said with a smile. "Did you sleep well?" Thomas nodded. He sat down at the small wooden table. The table was old and had scratches on it from many years of use. His grandmother put a plate in front of him. It had 2 eggs, 3 pieces of bacon, and toast with butter. "What are we doing today, Grandma?" Thomas asked. He took a big bite of his toast. "We need to go to the market," she said. "We need bread, milk, and some vegetables. Then we can walk by the castle." "You always like to see the guards." Thomas's eyes got bright. He loved going near Windsor Castle. The castle was huge and made of gray stone. It had tall towers and many windows. But what Thomas liked most were the royal guards. They stood very still in their red uniforms. They wore big black hats made of fur. The hats were so tall they made the guards look like giants. His grandmother sat down across from him. She had a cup of tea in her hands. Steam came up from the cup. "Tommy, do you remember the stories I tell you about the war?" Thomas nodded. His grandmother always told him stories about World War II. She had worked for the government during the war. She said she helped break secret codes. Thomas didn't understand all of it, but he liked the stories. "Well, today I want to teach you something special," she said. "Something that might be important someday." Thomas stopped eating. He looked at his grandmother with curious eyes. "What kind of something?" "A special phrase," she said. "During the war, we had special words. These words told people we were on the same side. They told people we could be trusted." Thomas thought this sounded exciting. "Like a secret code?" "Yes, exactly like a secret code," his grandmother said. She smiled at him. "The phrase is, 'The nightingale sings at midnight for the crown.' Can you remember that?" Thomas repeated the words slowly. "The nightingale sings at midnight for the crown." "Very good," his grandmother said. "Say it again." Thomas said it 3 more times. Each time his grandmother nodded and smiled. "Perfect, Tommy. Now this phrase is very special. You should only use it if something bad is happening. If you see something dangerous and you need help from the police or the guards, you say these words. They will know you are telling the truth." Thomas didn't really understand why he would need such a phrase, but he trusted his grandmother. She was the smartest person he knew. If she said it was important, then it was important. After breakfast, they got ready to go out. His grandmother put on her blue coat and her walking shoes. Thomas put on his jacket. It was red with a zipper up the front. His grandmother gave him a small leather bag. "This has our shopping money," she said. "Hold it tight. Don't lose it." The leather bag felt heavy in Thomas's hands. It made a jingling sound when he moved it. There were coins inside. His grandmother didn't have much money, so every coin was important. They walked out of their small house. The street was quiet. Only a few people were walking around. Mrs. Peterson was watering her flowers. Mr. Davies was reading his newspaper on his porch. These were their neighbors. They all knew Thomas and his grandmother. "Good morning, Maggie," called Mrs. Peterson. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Yes, it is," his grandmother called back. "Perfect day for a walk." They walked down the street toward the town center. The houses on their street were old but well cared for. Most had small gardens in front. Some had roses growing near the doors. The air smelled like flowers and fresh morning. As they walked, Thomas's grandmother pointed out different things. "Look at that robin, Tommy. See how red his chest is?" She always noticed birds and flowers. She said it was important to pay attention to the world around you. They passed the old church with its tall bell tower. The church bells chimed 10 times. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. They passed the small park where Thomas sometimes played. There were swings and a slide there. A few children were playing with their mothers watching. "Grandma, tell me more about the codes," Thomas said as they walked. "Well," she said, "during the war, we had to be very careful. Not everyone could be trusted, so we had special ways to talk to each other. If someone knew the right words, we knew they were helping our side." "Were you like a spy?" Thomas asked. This sounded very exciting to him. His grandmother laughed. "Not exactly a spy, Tommy, but I did help with secret things. I worked in a big building with other people. We would get messages from far away. These messages were written in code. Our job was to figure out what they really said." Thomas tried to imagine his grandmother as a young woman, working with secret codes. It was hard to picture. To him, she was just Grandma Maggie who made good cookies and told bedtime stories. They walked for 20 minutes. Finally, they could see the tall walls of Windsor Castle in the distance. The gray stone walls looked strong and old. Flags were flying from the towers. The flags moved in the gentle wind. "There it is, Tommy," his grandmother said. "One of the most important places in all of England." Thomas felt excited. Soon they would walk past the castle gates. Soon he would see the royal guards standing at their posts. He had no idea that this ordinary Tuesday morning walk would become the most important day of his young life. The leather bag with their shopping money jingled in his hand as they walked toward their date with destiny. Thomas and his grandmother walked closer to Windsor Castle. The big stone walls got bigger as they got nearer. More people were walking around now. There were tourists taking pictures. There were families with children. Everyone wanted to see the famous castle. "Look, Tommy," his grandmother said. She pointed to the castle gates. "There are the guards." Thomas looked where she was pointing. He could see the royal guards standing very still. They wore their red uniforms and tall black hats. They held rifles and stood like statues. Thomas always wondered how they could stand so still for so long. The morning was getting warmer. More clouds were in the sky now. The wind was blowing a little stronger. Thomas's jacket flapped as they walked. The leather bag in his hand felt safe and secure. As they got closer to the tourist area, Thomas noticed 3 men standing near a bench. Something about these men made him look twice. They were wearing dark coats even though the day was getting warm. Most people were wearing lighter clothes. The 3 men were not looking at the castle like the other tourists. They were not taking pictures. They were not reading the information signs. Instead, they kept looking at their watches. They talked to each other in quiet voices. One of them kept pointing toward the guard posts. Thomas's grandmother had taught him to notice things. "Always pay attention, Tommy," she would say. Sometimes the most important things are the things other people don't see. The first man was tall and thin. He had dark hair and wore glasses. He kept reaching into his coat pocket and pulling out something small. Thomas couldn't see what it was. The man would look at it, then put it back in his pocket. The second man was shorter and had a beard. He wore a black coat that looked expensive. This man kept checking his watch every few minutes. He would look at his watch, then look at the guards, then talk to the other men. The third man was medium height with no hair on his head. He had a small bag hanging from his shoulder. This man kept pointing at different parts of the castle, but he wasn't pointing like a tourist. He was pointing like someone making a plan. Thomas slowed down his walking. He wanted to hear what the men were saying. His grandmother was looking at a sign about the castle's history. She didn't notice that Thomas was falling behind. The 3 men were speaking, but not in English. Thomas heard words he didn't understand. But then one of them switched to English. Thomas heard the tall man say, "Remember exactly at 3:15. The man with the beard nodded. "Yes, when the afternoon shift starts. That's when we make our move." Thomas felt his heart beat faster. Make their move. What did that mean? He moved a little closer, pretending to look at some flowers planted near the path. The bald man opened his small bag. Thomas tried to see what was inside, but the man closed it quickly. "Everything is ready," the bald man said. "The package will be delivered exactly on time." Package. Thomas thought. What kind of package? The tall man looked around nervously. Thomas quickly looked away and pretended to smell the flowers. When he looked back, the man was pulling something from his pocket again. This time Thomas could see it was a small piece of paper. "The schedule hasn't changed," the tall man said. "The Red Queen will be exactly where we planned. Thomas's eyes got wide. Red Queen? Were they talking about Queen Elizabeth? She was sometimes called the Red Queen because of her red dresses. Thomas had seen her picture many times. His grandmother called to him. "Tommy, come along." Don't fall behind. Thomas hurried to catch up with his grandmother. His mind was spinning with what he had heard. 3:15. Afternoon shift package Red Queen. These words swirled around in his head like a puzzle. "Grandma," Thomas said quietly, "those three men over there, they're talking about strange things." His grandmother looked where Thomas was pointing. She saw the three men in dark coats. For a moment, her face changed. Thomas saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. It was the look of someone who understood danger. "What kind of strange things, Tommy?" she asked. Her voice was different now. It was serious and focused. "They said something about 3:15 and the afternoon shift, and they called someone the Red Queen." His grandmother's face went pale. She knew exactly what Thomas meant by Red Queen. Everyone in England knew that was sometimes what people called their queen. "Tommy," she said very quietly, "we need to be very careful. Keep walking normally. Don't look back at those men." Thomas felt scared but also excited. This was like one of his grandmother's war stories, but it was real. It was happening right now. They walked past a group of tourists taking pictures. A family with two small children was buying postcards from a vendor. Everything around them seemed normal, but Thomas knew that something was very wrong. His grandmother was thinking fast. She remembered her training from the war. She remembered how to spot people who didn't belong. These three men in dark coats were definitely suspicious. "Grandma, what should we do?" Thomas whispered. "First, we need to find out more," she said. "But we have to be smart about it. We can't let them know we're watching them." They walked to a nearby bench and sat down. From here, they could see the three men clearly. The men were still talking and checking their watches. The tall man pulled out his piece of paper again and showed it to the others. Thomas watched carefully. He saw the man point to different parts of the paper. The other men nodded as if they understood a plan. Then the bald man took out what looked like a phone and made a call. "Tommy," his grandmother said, "I need you to remember exactly what they said. Can you repeat their words?" Thomas closed his eyes and thought hard. The tall man said exactly at 3:15. The man with the beard said, "When the afternoon shift starts, that's when we make our move." And the bald man said, "The package will be delivered exactly on time." His grandmother nodded grimly. "And they mentioned the Red Queen." "Yes," Thomas said. The tall man said, "The Red Queen will be exactly where we planned." Thomas could see his grandmother's mind working. She was putting pieces together like she used to do with codes during the war. The timing, the location, the reference to the Queen. It all pointed to something dangerous. A tour guide walked by with a group of visitors. The guide was explaining the castle's history. "The Queen often makes public appearances here," the guide said. "Sometimes she greets visitors in the afternoon." Thomas and his grandmother looked at each other. The afternoon. 3:15. The Queen's public appearance. Suddenly everything made terrible sense. The three men were still standing by their bench. One of them was now writing something down. Another was taking pictures, but not of the castle. He was taking pictures of the guard positions and the gates. "Tommy," his grandmother said very seriously, "I think these men are planning something bad, something that could hurt people, maybe even hurt the Queen." Thomas felt his stomach turn over. The Queen? Someone wanted to hurt the Queen? That was the worst thing he could imagine. "What do we do, Grandma?" he asked. His grandmother looked toward the royal guards standing at their posts. They looked so strong and professional in their red uniforms, but they didn't know about the three men. They didn't know about the plan. "We need to warn someone," she said. "But who will believe us? Who will listen to an old woman and a little boy?" Thomas remembered the special phrase his grandmother had taught him that morning. "The nightingale sings at midnight for the crown." She had said to use it if something dangerous was happening. "Grandma," he said, "what about the special phrase you taught me? You said it would make people listen." His grandmother's eyes lit up. Of course, the old wartime code phrase. Some of the older guards might still know it. It was worth a try. But first, they needed more information. They needed proof. They needed to know exactly what these three dangerous men were planning. The clock on the castle tower chimed 11 times. It was 11 o'clock. They had 4 hours and 15 minutes until 3:15. 4 hours to figure out how to stop whatever terrible thing was being planned. Thomas squeezed the leather bag with their shopping money. Somehow buying bread and milk didn't seem important anymore. Nothing seemed important except stopping these three men and protecting the Queen. Thomas and his grandmother sat on the bench trying to look like normal tourists. His grandmother pretended to read a guidebook about the castle. Thomas pretended to watch the pigeons walking around on the ground. But really they were both watching the three suspicious men. The men were about 30 feet away. They were still talking in their quiet voices. Sometimes they spoke in that foreign language Thomas couldn't understand, but sometimes they spoke in English. "Tommy," his grandmother whispered, "I'm going to tie my shoe. While I'm down there, you walk a little closer to those men. Try to hear what they're saying. But be very careful. Don't let them see you listening." Thomas nodded. His heart was beating fast. This felt like a spy mission from one of his adventure books. But this was real and it was dangerous. His grandmother bent down to tie her shoe. She was taking a long time on purpose. Thomas walked slowly toward the three men. He pretended to be interested in a statue of a horse near where they were standing. The statue was about 15 feet from the men. Thomas could hear their voices better now. The tall man with glasses was holding his piece of paper. He was showing it to the other two men. "The route is simple," the tall man said in English. "She always takes the same path when she greets the public." Thomas felt his stomach drop. They were definitely talking about the Queen. She was the one who greeted the public. The man with the beard pointed to something on the paper. "And you're sure about the timing?" "Absolutely sure," said the bald man. 3:15 exactly. That's when the guard change happens. For exactly 3 minutes, there will be confusion. The old guards will be leaving their posts. The new guards will be taking their positions. That's our window. Thomas pretended to read the sign about the horse statue, but every word the men said was burning into his memory. Guard change. 3 minutes, window. These were important clues. The tall man folded the paper and put it back in his pocket. "The device is small enough to get close," he said. "No one will suspect anything until it's too late." "Device?" Thomas felt cold. What kind of device were they talking about? The man with the beard checked his watch again. "We have 4 hours to get into position. Remember, we each have our jobs. No mistakes." The bald man adjusted his shoulder bag. "My part is ready. The distraction will work perfectly." Thomas was getting more scared by the minute. These men had a plan. They had a device. They were going to use some kind of distraction. And it was all going to happen when the Queen was greeting people. One of the men started walking toward Thomas. Thomas quickly focused on the statue sign. He read it out loud quietly. "This statue shows King George's favorite horse, Britannia." The tall man walked right past Thomas. He didn't seem to notice him. Thomas was just a little boy reading about a statue. The man walked to a trash can and threw something away. After the man walked back to his friends, Thomas had an idea. Maybe the man had thrown away something important. Maybe there was a clue in the trash can, but first he needed to hear more of their conversation. He walked a little closer, pretending to look at some flowers planted in a circle. The three men were talking in the foreign language again. Thomas couldn't understand the words, but he could tell they were excited. Their voices were getting a little louder. Then the man with the beard switched back to English. "The people will panic when they hear the noise," he said. "Everyone will run toward the exits. That's when we strike. Noise? Strike?" Thomas felt sick. These men were planning to hurt people. They were going to make loud noises to scare everyone. Then they were going to do something terrible while people were running and scared. The tall man looked around nervously. "Keep your voices down," he said. "We can't let anyone hear us." Thomas quickly looked away. He stared at the flowers like they were the most interesting flowers in the world. After a few seconds, he looked back. The men were talking more quietly now. The bald man was showing something to the others. It looked like a phone, but it was different. It had buttons and a small antenna. "This will send the signal," he said. "When I press this, everything starts. Signal?" Thomas was learning more pieces of the puzzle. The men had some kind of signaling device. They were going to use it to start their plan. "And you're sure the timing is right?" the man with the beard asked again. "Perfect timing," the tall man said. "Her Majesty always appears at exactly 3:15 on Tuesdays. She greets the public for exactly 10 minutes. The guard change happens at the same time. It's like a clockwork schedule." Thomas realized something terrible. Today was Tuesday. The Queen was coming today. In just a few hours, she would be standing in the exact spot where these dangerous men were planning their attack. The man with the beard looked at his expensive watch. We should separate now. Meet back here at 3 o'clock. 15 minutes before it starts. Thomas knew he had to get away. The men were about to separate, and he needed to tell his grandmother everything he had heard. He walked back toward the statue, then slowly back to where his grandmother was still pretending to tie her shoe. "Grandma," he whispered when he got close. "I heard lots of things. Terrible things." His grandmother finished with her shoe and stood up. "Tell me everything, Tommy. Every single word you can remember." They walked to a different bench farther away from the three men. Thomas told his grandmother everything. The guard change at 3:15. The 3-minute window. The device. The signal. The noise to make people panic. The plan to strike when everyone was running. His grandmother's face got paler and paler as Thomas talked. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Tommy," she said finally, "these men are terrorists. They're planning to hurt the Queen and probably many other people too." Terrorists. Thomas had heard that word on the news. These were the worst kind of bad people. They hurt innocent people to make a point or to get attention. "We have to stop them," Thomas said. "Yes, we do," his grandmother agreed, "but we have to be smart about it. We can't just run up to a guard and say we overheard some suspicious men. They might not believe us, or they might waste time asking us questions while the terrorists get away." Thomas remembered the trash can. Grandma, one of them threw something away. Maybe there's a clue in the trash. His grandmother's eyes lit up. "Good thinking, Tommy. Let's go look." They walked casually toward the trash can. The three men were still standing by their bench, but they weren't paying attention to anyone else. They were focused on their own evil plan. When they reached the trash can, Thomas's grandmother looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then she quickly reached inside and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully. Her eyes grew wide as she read it. "Tommy," she whispered, "this is a map." A map of the castle grounds. "And look at these markings." Thomas looked at the paper. There were drawings of the castle gates and the guard positions. There were arrows showing a path. There were timestamps written in different places, and there were strange symbols that looked like some kind of code. "What did the symbols mean?" Thomas asked. His grandmother studied them carefully. Her years of breaking codes during the war were helping her now. "I think these show where they're going to place their devices. And this symbol here," she pointed to a drawing that looked like an explosion. "This shows where they expect the most damage." The most damage. Thomas felt tears coming to his eyes. These men wanted to hurt his queen. They wanted to hurt innocent people who just came to see the castle. "Grandma, we have to warn someone right now." "You're right, Tommy. But we need to be very careful about how we do it. We need to make sure the right people listen to us. And we need to make sure the terrorists don't see us talking to the guards." Thomas looked toward the royal guards standing at their posts. They looked so strong and brave in their red uniforms. Surely they would know what to do. Surely they would protect the Queen. But how could an 8-year-old boy and his grandmother convince them that danger was coming? How could they make the guards believe them in time to stop the terrible plan? The clock on the castle tower chimed 12 times. Noon. They had 3 hours and 15 minutes left. 3 hours to save the Queen and all the innocent people who would be visiting the castle that afternoon. Thomas squeezed his grandmother's hand. "We can do this, Grandma. We can stop them." His grandmother squeezed back. "Yes, Tommy, we can. And we will. But first they needed a plan of their own." Thomas and his grandmother sat on a bench far from the three suspicious men. They studied the crumpled paper carefully. The map showed details that made Thomas's stomach feel sick. There were drawings of escape routes. There were marks showing where crowds would gather. There were timing notes written in different colors of ink. "Look at this, Tommy," his grandmother said. She pointed to a red circle on the map. "This is where the Queen always stands when she greets people. And look what they've marked here." Thomas saw a black X drawn right on top of the red circle. Next to the X, someone had written 317 and drawn a small explosion symbol. 317, Thomas whispered. "That's 2 minutes after the Queen appears." "Exactly," his grandmother said. "They're giving her time to get into position. Time for the crowd to gather around her. Then they'll strike when the most people are close." Thomas felt angry and scared at the same time. How could anyone want to hurt the Queen? She was a nice old lady who waved at people and smiled at children. She had never heard anyone. His grandmother was studying other parts of the map. "These numbers here," she said, pointing to small writing in the corners. "I think they're distances. They show how far each man will be from the main target." Thomas saw what she meant. There were 3 different positions marked on the map. Each one had a different colored dot. Blue, green, and red dots showed where each terrorist would stand. "They're surrounding her," Thomas said. "They're going to attack from 3 different directions." "That's right," his grandmother said grimly. "This is a very well-planned attack. These men are professionals." Thomas looked across the courtyard at the 3 men. They had separated now. The tall man was walking toward the east gate. The man with the beard was moving toward the west side of the castle. The bald man was staying near the main entrance. "Grandma, they're already getting into position," Thomas said. His grandmother looked where Thomas was pointing. "You're right. They're not waiting until 3 o'clock like they said. They're moving now." This made everything more urgent. The terrorists were starting their plan early. Maybe they wanted to scout their positions. Maybe they wanted to hide their devices before the crowd got bigger. Thomas noticed something else. As the tall man walked away, he dropped another piece of paper. The wind started to blow it away, but it got caught on a bush near the path. "There's another paper," Thomas told his grandmother. They got up from their bench and walked casually toward the bush. Thomas's grandmother pretended to admire the flowers while Thomas rescued the paper from the thorny branches. This paper was different from the first one. It had a list of words written in neat handwriting, but the words were strange. They didn't make sense together. "Falcon flies at sunset," Thomas read quietly. "Eagle nests in the tower. Sparrow sings the final song." His grandmother's eyes went wide when she heard these words. "Tommy, these are code words, just like we used during the war. Each phrase means something different." "What do they mean?" Thomas asked. His grandmother thought for a moment. During the war, bird names often meant different people or positions. Falcon might mean the leader. Eagle might mean the person in the highest position. Sparrow might mean the person who gives the final signal. Thomas understood. "So Falcon flies at sunset means the leader starts the attack when the sun sets?" "Not exactly sunset," his grandmother said. "Remember, this is code. Sunset probably means a specific time. Maybe it means when the queen appears. That would be their sunset because it's when their target arrives." They studied the paper more carefully. There were other phrases, too. Storm clouds gather quickly. Lightning strikes without warning. Thunder follows in 3 beats. Storm, lightning, thunder, Thomas said. "That sounds like their plan. First, something happens to gather the crowds. Then the attack. Then something else happens 3 beats later." His grandmother nodded. "You're getting good at this, Tommy. 3 beats probably means 3 minutes. Remember what they said about the guard change? It takes exactly 3 minutes." Thomas felt proud that he was helping solve the code, but he also felt more scared. The more they understood, the more real the danger became. "Look at the bottom of the paper," his grandmother said. At the bottom, someone had written 3 phone numbers. Next to each number was a time. 3:10, 3:15, and 3:20. Those are the times they'll call each other, Thomas realized. "Yes," his grandmother said. "At 3:10, they'll confirm everyone is ready. At 3:15, they'll start the attack. At 3:20, they'll probably call to confirm it worked or to signal their escape." Thomas looked at his watch. It was 12:30. They had 2 hours and 40 minutes before the first phone call. 2 hours and 45 minutes before the attack began. "Grandma, we have to tell someone now. We can't wait any longer," his grandmother agreed. "You're right, Tommy, but we need to be very careful. If the terrorists see us talking to the guards, they might change their plan. Or they might attack early. Or they might run away and try again another day." Thomas thought about this. "So we need to warn the guards without the bad men seeing us?" "Exactly. And we need to make sure the guards believe us quickly. We don't have time for long explanations." They looked toward the royal guards standing at their posts. The guards looked very serious and professional, but they also looked like they wouldn't believe a crazy story from a little boy and his grandmother. "Grandma, what about the special phrase you taught me? Will that really work?" His grandmother considered this carefully. "It might, Tommy. Some of the older guards might remember the wartime codes, but we'll only get one chance. If we approach a guard and use the code phrase, we better be ready to explain everything very quickly." Thomas felt the weight of responsibility on his small shoulders. The safety of the Queen and many innocent people depended on them. They had to get this right. Just then they saw something that made their hearts sink. The bald man was walking back toward the main entrance. But now he was carrying a different bag. This bag was larger and looked heavier, and he was being very careful with it, holding it close to his body. "He's got the device," Thomas whispered. His grandmother watched the man carefully. "Yes, I think you're right. And look how he's walking. He's trying to look casual, but he's nervous. He keeps looking around to see if anyone is watching him." The man stopped near a large flower planter close to where the queen would stand. He pretended to tie his shoe, but Thomas and his grandmother could see him doing something else. He was reaching under the planter like he was hiding something there. "He's planting it now," his grandmother said. "The device is already in position." Thomas felt panic rising in his chest. "But it's only 12:30. They're not supposed to start until 3:15. "They're putting everything in place early," his grandmother explained. "The devices are probably set to go off at the right time, even if the men aren't there to activate them manually." This changed everything. Even if they caught the 3 men, the devices might still be set to explode. They needed to warn the guards not just about the men, but about the hidden devices too. Thomas looked at the crumpled papers in his grandmother's hands. They had evidence now. They had maps and codes and timing information. Surely this would be enough to convince the guards. "Grandma, which guard should we talk to?" Thomas asked. His grandmother studied the guards carefully. There were 4 guards visible from where they sat. 2 young men who looked like they were in their 20s. 1 middle-aged man who looked like he was in his 40s. And 1 older man with gray hair showing under his tall black hat. "The older one," she said. "He's the most likely to remember the old codes. And he's probably seen enough in his career to recognize real danger when he hears about it." The older guard was standing near the main gate. He was about 50 feet away from where the bald man had hidden his device. If they could warn him, he could alert the bomb squad and the security team. Thomas felt his heart pounding. In a few minutes, he would walk up to a royal guard and say the secret phrase his grandmother had taught him. Everything depended on whether the guard would listen and believe. "Are you ready, Tommy?" his grandmother asked. Thomas took a deep breath. He thought about the queen. He thought about all the innocent people who would be hurt if the terrorists succeeded. He thought about how proud he would be if he could help save them. "I'm ready, Grandma. Let's go save the queen." Thomas and his grandmother got up from their bench. Thomas's hands were shaking a little bit. The 2 pieces of paper with the terrorist plans were folded carefully in his grandmother's purse. The leather bag with their shopping money was still in Thomas's hand, but he had forgotten all about buying bread and milk. "Remember, Tommy," his grandmother said quietly as they walked. "You need to say the phrase exactly right. 'The nightingale sings at midnight for the crown.' Say it clearly and look the guard in the eyes." Thomas repeated the words in his head. "The nightingale sings at midnight for the crown." He had practiced it all morning, but now it felt like the most important sentence he would ever say. They walked slowly toward the older guard. Thomas could see the man's face now. He had kind eyes and lines around them that showed he smiled a lot. His uniform was perfect. Every button was shiny. Every stripe was straight. He stood very still, but Thomas could tell he was watching everything around him. As they got closer, Thomas felt more nervous. What if the guard didn't know the code? What if he thought Thomas was just a silly little boy playing games? What if the terrorists saw them talking and ran away before they could be caught? "Don't worry, Tommy," his grandmother whispered. "You can do this. Just remember what I taught you about being brave. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." Thomas nodded. He was definitely scared, but he was also determined. The queen needed his help. All those innocent people needed his help. When they were about 10 feet away from the guard, Thomas's grandmother stopped. "I'll wait here," she said. "You go talk to him alone. If I come with you, he might think we're just tourists asking for directions." Thomas took a deep breath. He walked the last 10 feet by himself. The guard seemed very tall when Thomas got close. The man's black hat made him look like a giant. Thomas stood in front of the guard and looked up at his face. The guard's eyes moved down to look at Thomas, but the rest of his body stayed perfectly still. "Excuse me, sir," Thomas said in a clear voice. "The nightingale sings at midnight for the crown." The guard's eyes changed immediately. The polite but distant look disappeared. Suddenly, the guard was looking at Thomas with complete attention. The man's whole body seemed to become more alert even though he didn't move. For a moment, that felt like forever. The guard just stared at Thomas. Thomas worried that he had said the phrase wrong. Or maybe this guard was too young to know the old wartime codes. Then the guard spoke. His voice was quiet, but Thomas could hear every word clearly. "Young man," the guard said, "where did you learn that phrase?" Thomas felt a rush of relief. The guard knew the code. He was taking Thomas seriously. "My grandmother taught me, sir," Thomas said. "She worked with codes during World War II. She said I should only use it if something very dangerous was happening." The guard nodded slowly. "Your grandmother was right. That phrase means you have important security information. What kind of danger are you reporting?" Thomas had practiced what he would say. "There are 3 men planning to hurt the Queen. They're going to attack at 3:15 when she comes to greet people. They have devices hidden around the castle. They have maps and codes and a detailed plan." The guard's face became very serious. "How do you know this information?" "I heard them talking," Thomas said. "My grandmother and I were walking by the castle. I saw 3 men acting suspicious. They kept checking their watches and pointing at the guard posts. I got close enough to hear them talking about their plan." The guard looked over Thomas's head toward where his grandmother was standing. She waved at him and held up her purse to show she had the evidence papers. "Do you have proof of what you're telling me?" the guard asked Thomas. "Yes, sir." They dropped 2 pieces of paper. One has a map of the castle with their attack plan marked on it. The other has code words and phone numbers. My grandmother figured out what the codes mean. The guard was quiet for a moment. Thomas could see him thinking. This was a very serious accusation, but the guard could also see that Thomas was telling the truth. "Son," the guard said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. What you're telling me is extremely important. If you're right, we need to act immediately, but I also need to be absolutely sure you're not mistaken." "I'm not mistaken, sir," Thomas said. "I saw one of them hide something under the flower planter over there." Thomas pointed to where the bald man had been earlier. He was very careful about it, and they talked about making noise to scare people, then attacking when everyone was running. The guard followed Thomas's pointing finger. Thomas could see him studying the flower planter and the surrounding area. "What did these 3 men look like?" the guard asked. Thomas described each man carefully. The tall one with glasses and dark hair, the shorter one with a beard and expensive coat, the bald one with the shoulder bag. He told the guard about their dark coats and their foreign accents, and they specifically mentioned 3:15. The guard asked. "Yes, sir. They said that's when the afternoon guard shift changes. They said there would be exactly 3 minutes of confusion when the old guards leave and the new guards take their positions. They called it their window." The guard's face got even more serious. He knew that information about the guard changes was not something a little boy would know, unless he had really overheard it from someone planning an attack. "Son, I need you to stay calm," the guard said. "I'm going to signal to my colleagues. We're going to handle this situation immediately, but I need you and your grandmother to move away from this area. Go somewhere safe and stay there until this is over." Thomas felt proud and scared at the same time. The guard believed him. The plan was working, but now the real danger was about to begin. "What about the Queen?" Thomas asked. "Will she be safe?" "Don't worry about Her Majesty," the guard said. "We have procedures for situations like this. The Queen will be protected," Thomas nodded, but he was still worried. What if there were more devices hidden around the castle? What if the 3 men had backup plans? The guard made a small hand signal. Thomas couldn't see what it meant, but he noticed that other guards around the area suddenly became more alert. It was like a silent alarm had been sent to everyone. "Now," the guard said to Thomas, "I need you to go back to your grandmother. Take her somewhere away from the castle. Don't come back until you hear that everything is safe." Thomas started to walk back to his grandmother, but then he remembered something important. "Sir," he called back to the guard, "there's something else. They have code words for their plan. Falcon flies at sunset. Eagle nests in the tower. Sparrow sings the final song. My grandmother thinks these might be signals for different parts of their attack." The guard nodded. "Thank you, son. That information could be very helpful." Thomas hurried back to his grandmother. When he reached her, she could see from his face that the conversation had gone well. "He believed me, Grandma," Thomas said. He knew the code phrase. "He's going to stop the attack." His grandmother hugged him. "I'm so proud of you, Tommy. You were very brave." But even as she hugged him, they could both see activity starting around the castle. Guards were moving in ways that looked casual to tourists, but Thomas and his grandmother could tell something important was happening. The older guard was talking quietly into a small radio. Other guards were changing their positions slightly. Security people in regular clothes were appearing from different directions. "Come on, Tommy," his grandmother said. "We need to get away from here. Let the professionals handle it now." But as they started to walk away, Thomas saw something that made his blood run cold. The tall man with glasses was walking quickly toward the main gate. He had seen the increased activity. He knew something was wrong. The attack plan was about to change. The older royal guard that Thomas had spoken to was named Sergeant William Hayes. He had been protecting the royal family for 22 years. He had served in the army before that. He had seen many dangerous situations, but nothing quite like this. When Thomas walked away, Sergeant Hayes immediately pressed a small button on his radio. The button sent a silent emergency signal to the security command center inside the castle. Within seconds, his radio crackled quietly with a response. "Command here. Report Sergeant Hayes." Sergeant Hayes spoke very quietly into his radio microphone. To anyone watching, it looked like he was just adjusting his uniform. "Possible code red situation. Credible threat report from civilian source. Request immediate threat assessment team." "Copy that." "Details?" 3 suspects planning coordinated attack at 15:15 hours. Explosives possibly already in position. Suspects currently on grounds. I need a discreet sweep team and immediate backup." "Understood. Stay in position. Team deploying now." Sergeant Hayes felt his training take over. His body remained perfectly still in the formal guard position, but his mind was racing. He was mentally reviewing all the security protocols for this exact type of situation. First, he needed to identify and locate the 3 suspects. Second, he needed to find and secure any explosive devices. Third, he needed to protect the civilians in the area. Fourth, he needed to ensure the Queen's appearance was either canceled or moved to a safe location. Through his peripheral vision, Sergeant Hayes could see Thomas and his grandmother walking away. The boy had done exactly the right thing. But now Sergeant Hayes noticed something troubling. One of the men Thomas had described, the tall one with glasses, was moving quickly through the crowd. The man seemed to sense that something had changed. He kept looking around nervously. He was heading toward the main exit, but he was also pulling out his phone. Sergeant Hayes spoke into his radio again. "Suspect 1 is mobile and appears to be alerting accomplices. Tall male, dark hair, glasses, dark coat. Currently moving toward East Gate. Copy. Plainclothes units moving to intercept." Sergeant Hayes watched as several tourists suddenly changed direction. But these weren't really tourists. They were security officers in civilian clothes. They were part of the special protection team that was always present when the Queen made public appearances. The tall man with glasses had reached the East Gate. He was talking rapidly on his phone. Even from a distance, Sergeant Hayes could see the man was agitated. The terrorist was warning his partners that their plan had been discovered. Suddenly, the man ended his phone call and started running. He pushed through a group of real tourists and headed for the street beyond the castle grounds. 2 of the plainclothes security officers started running after him. But Sergeant Hayes was worried. If the man escaped, he might still be able to trigger the explosive devices remotely. "Command, suspect 1 is attempting to flee on foot. Officers in pursuit." "Understood. What about the other 2 suspects?" Sergeant Hayes scanned the area carefully. He couldn't see the man with the beard or the bald man anywhere. They had disappeared into the crowd of tourists. Suspects 2 and 3 not currently visible. They may have gone to ground or they may be moving to alternate positions. Copy. Bomb disposal team is 2 minutes out. Can you confirm location of possible explosive device? Sergeant Hayes looked toward the flower planter where Thomas had said he saw the bald man hide something. The planter was about 50 feet away, right in the area where crowds gathered to see the Queen. Possible device concealed in flower planter. Grid reference Charlie 7. High priority target area for crowd safety. Bomb disposal moving to that location now. Sergeant Hayes watched as 2 men in work uniforms approached the flower planter. They looked like maintenance workers, but they were actually bomb disposal experts. They carried tool bags that contained sophisticated equipment for detecting and disarming explosive devices. Meanwhile, other security officers were quietly evacuating the area around the planter. They did it so smoothly that most tourists didn't even notice. They just found themselves being gently guided to other parts of the castle grounds. Sergeant Hayes's radio crackled again. Sergeant, we need you to maintain normal appearances. Continue standard guard duties, but keep reporting on anything unusual. This was the hardest part. Sergeant Hayes had to stand perfectly still and look like nothing was happening, while all around him a major security operation was taking place. He watched the bomb disposal experts work. One of them had a small device that looked like a metal detector. He was moving it slowly around the base of the flower planter. Suddenly the device started beeping. Command, bomb disposal has positive reading on explosive device. Repeat, confirmed explosive device at Charlie 7. Sergeant Hayes felt his heart rate increase. The little boy had been absolutely right. There really was a bomb hidden in the flower planter. How long to disarm? Came the voice from command. Unknown at this time. Device appears to be sophisticated. Requesting additional time and equipment. Copy. Her Majesty's appearance is being delayed indefinitely. Official reason is scheduling conflict. Sergeant Hayes felt relief. The Queen would be safe, but there were still hundreds of tourists in the area, and there might be more bombs hidden in other locations. His radio crackled with an update. Suspect 1 in custody. He was carrying a remote detonation device. Suspect refused to cooperate, but device has been secured. That was good news. But where were the other 2 terrorists? Sergeant Hayes continued scanning the crowd. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. The man with the beard was standing near the west gate, but he wasn't trying to leave. He was holding something in his hand, and he was watching the bomb disposal team work. Command, I have visual on suspect 2. Male with beard, dark coat, west gate area. He appears to be observing our bomb disposal operation. Do not approach. Plainclothes units moving to intercept. But as Sergeant Hayes watched, the man with the beard raised his hand. In his hand was a small device with an antenna. It looked exactly like the signaling device the tall man had been carrying. Command, suspect 2 has what appears to be a detonation device. He's in position to trigger. All units, take down suspect 2 immediately. Everything happened very fast after that. 3 security officers converged on the man with the beard from different directions. The man saw them coming and tried to press a button on his device. But before he could complete the action, one of the officers tackled him to the ground. The device flew out of his hand and skidded across the stone courtyard. Tourists screamed and started running in all directions. The careful, quiet security operation had suddenly become very visible and very frightening. Sergeant Hayes spoke urgently into his radio. Crowd control needed immediately. Tourists are panicking. Copy. All available units respond for crowd control. More security officers appeared from everywhere. Some of them were directing tourists away from the danger areas. Others were searching for the third terrorist, the bald man who might still be somewhere in the crowd. Through all of this chaos, Sergeant Hayes remained at his post. This was his job. No matter what was happening around him, he had to maintain security at his assigned position. But inside, he was thinking about the brave little boy who had started this whole operation. Thomas had probably saved dozens of lives, maybe including the Queen's life. Command, Sergeant Hayes said into his radio. Recommend commendation for civilian who provided initial threat report. Information was accurate and timely. Noted, Sergeant. We'll want to debrief the civilians once this situation is secured. Sergeant Hayes nodded to himself. He hoped he would get a chance to see Thomas again and tell him how proud everyone was of his courage. But first, they had to find the third terrorist and make sure there were no more bombs hidden around the castle grounds. The danger wasn't over yet. Thomas and his grandmother had walked about 200 yards away from the castle when they heard shouting behind them. They turned around and saw people running in different directions. Some tourists looked confused. Others looked scared. Something's happening, Grandma, Thomas said. His grandmother could see security officers moving quickly through the crowd. The guards must have found the terrorists. We did the right thing, Tommy. Now we need to stay out of the way and let them handle it. But even from their safe distance, they could see that the situation was becoming very serious. More police cars were arriving. An ambulance was parked near the main gate. Men in special uniforms were setting up barriers to keep people away from certain areas. Thomas was worried about the third terrorist, the bald man who had hidden the bomb under the flower planter. Grandma, what if that man is still out there? What if he has another way to set off the bomb? His grandmother was thinking the same thing. The police will find him, Tommy. They're trained for this kind of situation. Inside the castle security command center, a dozen people were working frantically. Computer screens showed live video feeds from cameras all around the castle grounds. Radio operators were coordinating with police units, bomb disposal teams, and royal protection officers. The command center chief was a woman named Inspector Sarah Mitchell. She had been in charge of royal security for 8 years. She had never dealt with anything quite this serious, but her training had prepared her for exactly this type of situation. "Status report," Inspector Mitchell called out. "Suspect 1 in custody. Suspect 2 in custody. Both detonation devices secured," came the first response. "Bomb disposal team has located the device in the flower planter. Working on disarmament now," said another voice. "Suspect 3 still at large. All exits are being monitored," reported a third officer. Inspector Mitchell studied the video screens. Hundreds of tourists were still in the area, though many were being quietly moved away from the most dangerous zones. Finding one man in this crowd would be very difficult. "What do we know about Suspect 3? She asked. An officer read from his notes. "Bald male, medium height, carrying a shoulder bag. Last seen near the main entrance approximately 30 minutes ago." Inspector Mitchell looked at the main entrance camera feed. The image showed dozens of people walking in and out. Any one of them could be the missing terrorist. "Expand the search area," she ordered. "He may have left the immediate castle grounds but stayed nearby. Check all the surrounding streets, shops, and car parks." Meanwhile, near the flower planter, the bomb disposal team was making progress. The device they had found was more sophisticated than expected, but it was not impossible to disarm. "Command, this is bomb disposal team leader," came a voice over the radio. "Device appears to be timer activated rather than remote controlled. We have approximately 47 minutes before scheduled detonation. Can you disarm it safely?" Inspector Mitchell asked. "Affirmative. We need approximately 20 minutes. Recommend continued evacuation of the immediate area. 20 minutes. Inspector Mitchell knew that was a long time when dealing with explosives and crowds of people. Anything could go wrong in 20 minutes. All units continue crowd control. Priority is getting civilians away from the device location. The security officers were doing an excellent job of moving people without causing panic. They told tourists that there was a scheduled maintenance activity in progress, and that viewing would be better from other areas of the castle grounds, but Inspector Mitchell was still worried about the third terrorist. A man desperate enough to plan an attack on the Queen might try something very dangerous when he realized his plan was failing. Her worry was justified. At that very moment, the bald man was hiding in a public restroom about 300 yards from the castle. He had seen his 2 partners being arrested. He knew the bomb had been discovered, but he wasn't ready to give up. The man pulled out his phone and made a call. He was calling someone who wasn't at the castle, someone who was part of a backup plan. "The primary operation has been compromised," he said into the phone. "Initiate Plan B immediately." On the other end of the phone call was a woman sitting in a car parked on a street near the castle. She had been waiting for exactly this type of emergency call. "Understood," the woman said. "Plan B is ready to go." The woman started her car and began driving toward the castle. In the back seat of her car were 2 large backpacks. The backpacks contained much more powerful explosives than the device hidden in the flower planter. Plan B was to ram the car through the castle gates and detonate the car bombs in the middle of the tourist area. It would cause much more damage than the original plan, but it would also be much more likely to succeed because no one knew about it. But the woman didn't know that her phone call had been intercepted. The British intelligence services constantly monitor phone calls for certain keywords and phrases. When the bald man said primary operation compromised and initiate Plan B, computers immediately flagged the call and traced both phone numbers. Within 30 seconds, Inspector Mitchell's radio crackled with an urgent message. "Command, this is intelligence services. We have intercepted a call indicating a secondary attack plan is being activated. Vehicle-based explosive device approaching your location." Inspector Mitchell felt her stomach drop. A car bomb was one of the worst possible scenarios. "Details on the vehicle?" she asked. "Blue sedan. License plate Hotel 72 Alpha 9 Charlie. Female driver. Vehicle should be approaching from the North Road within 5 minutes. All units, Inspector Mitchell announced. Code Black alert. Vehicle-borne explosive device approaching from North Road. Prepare to intercept and disable." The North Road was the main route that cars used to approach the castle. If a car bomb was coming that way, the security forces had a good chance of stopping it before it reached the main tourist areas. Armed police units were already moving into position. Special barriers that could stop even the heaviest vehicles were being deployed across the North Road. Thomas and his grandmother, still watching from their safe distance, saw even more police cars arriving with sirens blaring. They saw officers with rifles taking positions behind concrete barriers. "Grandma, this is getting very serious," Thomas said. "Yes, it is," his grandmother replied. "But look how quickly and professionally everyone is responding. This is what happens when good people work together to stop bad people." Thomas felt proud that he had been part of stopping the bad people, but he was also scared about what might happen next. In the castle command center, Inspector Mitchell was coordinating the response to the approaching car bomb, while also monitoring the progress of the bomb disposal team. "Bomb disposal, what's your status?" she asked. 12 minutes remaining until disarmament complete," came the response. "Vehicle intercept team, what's your status?" "Target vehicle spotted. Female driver matching description. We're in position to intercept in 90 seconds. Everything was happening at once. The success or failure of the entire operation would be determined in the next few minutes." Inspector Mitchell knew that many lives depended on her decisions and the skill of her teams. But she also knew that none of this would have been possible without the brave little boy who had first alerted them to the danger. Sometimes the most important heroes were the smallest ones. The blue sedan was driving fast down the North Road toward Windsor Castle. Inside the car, the woman terrorist was focused on her deadly mission. She could see the castle towers getting closer. In just 2 more minutes, she would crash through the gates and detonate the powerful bombs in her back seat. But she didn't see the police units that had taken positions along both sides of the road. "All units. Target vehicle is 500 meters out," came the voice over Inspector Mitchell's radio, preparing to deploy road spikes. The road spikes were special devices that could puncture car tires instantly. When the terrorist's car hit them, the tires would go flat and the car would lose control. "Deploy spikes now," Inspector Mitchell ordered. The police officers threw the spike strips across the road just as the blue sedan came around the final curve. The woman driver saw them at the last second and tried to swerve, but it was too late. All 4 tires hit the spikes and exploded. The car skidded sideways and crashed into a concrete barrier that the police had positioned for exactly this purpose. "Target vehicle disabled," reported the intercept team leader. "Driver appears unconscious. Approaching to secure." "Be careful," Inspector Mitchell warned. "Vehicle may still contain explosives." The bomb disposal experts, who weren't busy with the flower planter device, rushed to examine the crashed car. They could see the 2 large backpacks in the back seat. "Command, vehicle contains significant explosive devices, much larger than the first device. We're setting up a safety perimeter." Inspector Mitchell felt relief wash over her. The car bomb had been stopped before it could reach the castle or hurt any innocent people. "Status on the flower planter device?" she asked. 3 minutes to completion," came the response. "Disarmament proceeding normally." Meanwhile, police officers had surrounded the public restroom where the bald man was hiding. They had traced his location through his phone call. "Come out with your hands visible," called an officer through a megaphone. "You are surrounded." After a few tense minutes, the door opened and the bald man walked out slowly. His hands were raised and he looked defeated. All 3 terrorists were now in custody. "Command, suspect 3 in custody. All 3 subjects secured." Inspector Mitchell allowed herself a small smile. "Excellent work, everyone. Continue with crowd control until bomb disposal gives us the all clear." Thomas and his grandmother were still watching from their safe distance when they saw something wonderful. People had stopped running. Police officers were starting to look more relaxed. The sirens had stopped wailing. "I think it's over, Tommy," his grandmother said. "I think the good guys won." A few minutes later, they heard a cheer go up from the area near the castle. The bomb disposal team had successfully disarmed the device in the flower planter. The immediate danger was over. Within an hour, the area was declared safe. Tourists were allowed to return to most parts of the castle grounds. The Queen's scheduled appearance was canceled for that day, but an announcement said she would visit the following week instead. Thomas and his grandmother were about to head home when a police officer approached them. "Excuse me," the officer said politely. "Are you Thomas Fletcher and Mrs. Margaret Fletcher?" "Yes," Thomas's grandmother replied. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all," the officer said with a smile. "Inspector Mitchell would like to speak with you both. She's the head of Royal Security. She wants to thank you personally for your help today. Thomas felt excited and nervous at the same time. The head of royal security wanted to meet him. They were escorted to a small office inside the castle. Inspector Mitchell was there along with Sergeant Hayes, the guard that Thomas had first spoken to. "Thomas," Inspector Mitchell said, "I want you to know that your actions today prevented a very serious terrorist attack. Because of your bravery and quick thinking, many lives were saved." Thomas felt proud but also a little embarrassed. "I just did what my grandmother taught me to do." Inspector Mitchell turned to Thomas's grandmother. "Mrs. Fletcher, we understand you served with the code-breaking division during World War II. Your training of Thomas in observation skills and security procedures was invaluable today." "Thank you," Thomas's grandmother said. "I never imagined he would actually need to use what I taught him." Sergeant Hayes stepped forward. "Thomas, that code phrase you used is one that I learned when I first joined the Royal Guard 22 years ago. Most people have forgotten it, but it immediately told me that you had legitimate security information. Without that phrase, I might not have taken your report seriously enough." "What happened to the bad men?" Thomas asked. "All 3 terrorists are in custody," Inspector Mitchell explained. "We also found their weapons and explosives. They won't be able to hurt anyone ever again." "And the Queen?" Thomas asked. "Is she safe?" "Her Majesty is perfectly safe," Inspector Mitchell said. "She's very grateful for what you did. In fact, she asked me to give you this." Inspector Mitchell handed Thomas an envelope with the royal seal on it. Inside was a letter written on official royal stationery. The letter read, "Dear Thomas, I have been informed of your exceptional bravery in helping to protect the safety of myself and many visitors to Windsor Castle. Your quick thinking and courage are an inspiration to people of all ages. Thank you for your service to the Crown. With my deepest gratitude, Elizabeth R." Thomas could hardly believe it. The Queen herself had written him a personal letter. "There's something else," Inspector Mitchell said. She handed Thomas another envelope. "This is an invitation for you and your grandmother to visit Buckingham Palace next month. Her Majesty would like to meet you in person." Thomas looked at his grandmother with wide eyes. They were going to meet the Queen. "Will there be a ceremony?" Thomas asked. "Something like that," Inspector Mitchell said with a smile. "But I'm afraid the details have to remain secret for now." Later that evening, Thomas and his grandmother sat in their small kitchen eating a late dinner. The events of the day seemed almost like a dream. "Grandma," Thomas said, "do you think we really made a difference today?" His grandmother looked at the royal letter sitting on their kitchen table. "Tommy, you saved lives today. You protected your queen and your country. You made the biggest difference anyone could make." Thomas thought about that. When he woke up that morning, he was just an ordinary 8-year-old boy going shopping with his grandmother. Now he was a hero who had helped stop a terrorist attack. "Grandma, why do you think the bad men wanted to hurt people?" His grandmother considered the question carefully. "Sometimes, Tommy, there are people in the world who think they can solve problems by hurting innocent people. They're wrong, of course. The only way to really solve problems is by being brave and good like you were today." Thomas nodded. He was beginning to understand that being brave wasn't just about not being scared. It was about doing the right thing even when it was difficult or dangerous. A few weeks later, the story appeared in the newspapers. The headlines read, "Boy Hero Stops Castle Attack and 8-year-old Saves Lives with Wartime Code." But the newspapers didn't print Thomas's full name or his picture to protect his privacy. Thomas kept the newspaper clippings in a special box along with his letter from the Queen. Sometimes, when he was having a difficult day at school or feeling sad about his parents, he would look at these items and remember that he was capable of doing extraordinary things. The following month, Thomas and his grandmother did visit Buckingham Palace. They had tea with the Queen in a beautiful room filled with paintings and gold furniture. The Queen told Thomas that she was very proud of him and that he would always be welcome at any royal residence. The Queen also gave Thomas a special medal that was created just for him. It had his name engraved on it along with the words "for exceptional courage and service to the Crown." Thomas wore the medal home under his shirt. It felt warm against his chest and reminded him that even the smallest person could make the biggest difference in the world. Years later, when Thomas was grown up, he became a police officer himself. He specialized in protecting important people and preventing terrorist attacks. He never forgot the lesson he learned that day at Windsor Castle, that being observant, being brave, and being willing to help others were the most important qualities any person could have. and he always carried in his wallet a small card with the words his grandmother had taught him. "The nightingale sings at midnight for the crown," just in case he ever needed to prove again that he was someone who could be trusted with important information. Sometimes, the most ordinary days turn out to be the most extraordinary ones, and sometimes the smallest heroes turn out to be the most important ones of all.